Well, this news is super bad for James Franco. Welcome to Popcorn Planet. I am Andy Signore, and Seth Rogen is making the rounds today promoting his new book and his marijuana business. And it was only a matter of time before he was asked about these recent allegations from Charlene Yee, who said she tried to quit The Disaster Artist, a film that Seth Rogen was in and produced along with James Franco, who directed and I believe wrote it as well. During those allegations back in 2017, 2018, she wanted out, and instead of bringing her out, they tried to bribe her and sort of enabled James Franco to sort of be there. She's talked about this in great detail over on her Instagram page. If you want to see what she's accusing, you can go over to her. She's archived them here. But it's been a while. Back in 2018, Seth was asked during this, I have to ask you about the recent allegations on this. And keeping with, are they keeping with the person you know? He said, the truth is that my perspective on this is the least relevant perspective. I'm friends with these people, and I'm a dude. All that combined makes me the last person who should be talking about this. Is it fair to say that the allegations didn't change anything about your willingness to work with him in the future? Yes, clearly saying he would still work with them. Can you tell me anything about the experiences of seeing someone you know well involved in a controversy like that? There are so many people with real things to contribute to the Me Too discussion with that anything I say is not going to add anything useful. He just sort of goes on to say, well, so you're saying your perspective as a white guy not being the most relevant to these larger cultural discussions. How does your awareness of that affect the way you work? And then he's like, I try to be with the curve, not behind it. This is not in any way pandering, but I think Neighbors 2 is an incredible progressive message. Blockers is incredibly, he goes on to sort of say, look, he's trying to do what he can do. And look, I don't fault him here. He's got a friend who's under fire, right? And so for the past over, a couple years, he's really avoided this topic, and James Franco has avoided the public spotlight in an attempt to sort of move forward. Well, today was the day where he could no longer sort of deny it. And so now Seth Rogen has been quoted as saying he's done with James Franco due to these allegations against him. This was a recent interview he did yesterday with Britain's Sunday Times. The actor-producer walked back his initial response, leveled against his friend after Charlene Yee's spotlight on Instagram. She said she didn't feel safe working with him, and she accused the production of dismissing her concerns by claiming that Franco that was just last year. He's changed. She alleged, well, she had heard that he was already talking to somebody new that week, and so she just wanted to get out. When I tried to break legal contract and quit The Disaster Artist because James Franco is a bad person, they tried to bribe me with a bigger acting role, Yee wrote, adding that Rogen definitely knows about the bribe and why I quit. Now, Seth Rogen doesn't address Charlene directly, but as I read you the 2018 interview, he sort of said, he had never a problem with it. Well, now that's changed. He told Sunday Times that he's changed his mind and that his lack of projects with Franco in recent years was not coincidental. What I can say is that I despise abuse, harassment, and I would never cover or conceal the actions of someone doing it or knowingly put someone in a situation where they were around someone like that, Rogen told Sunday Times, addressing Charlene's comments. I look back on the interview in 2018 where I comment that I would keep working with James, and the truth is that I have not, and I do not plan to right now. Asked if he maintained a personal relationship with Franco, Rogen hesitated. I don't know if I can define that right now during this interview. I can say it has changed many things in our relationship and our dynamic. While conceding that the aftermath of his allegations have been painful for him, Rogen acknowledges his experience is not as painful and difficult as for a lot of people involved. I have no pity for myself in this situation. Look, I think he handled this incredibly well, to be perfectly honest. You got to remember, a lot of people are going to say, oh, he's throwing his friend under the bus. And in a way, yeah, he is. But that's not good for James Franco. Seth Rogen, you'd think, would have more information about this topic and know, do I defend this guy or do I not? And the fact that he's not all these years later is not a good look for Franco, let's be clear. That said, Seth's just looking out for himself at this point, and I think he's held out as long as he could. I've been burned by my own friends who believed things they read that weren't true, and they did it immediately. They didn't even sort of follow up with me. It's clear that Seth and James have clearly talked and had conversations about this, and maybe had disagreements or whatever. I think enough time has passed that Seth now is getting the heat with Charlene Yee saying that he's responsible and enabling James, that I see why he needs to play this card now. He can no longer sort of avoid this topic, which he's done for now 2 years. But it's clear he sort of needs to address this as being that they're friends. And so, look, but at the same time, he sort of owns it. He doesn't really level in as hard as he probably could. He just says, look, we haven't worked together. And I don't like the comments I made back then. Because clearly people were upset by some of the comments he's made back then. And he's like, look, don't pity me. It's not painful for me. And I'm sure it is. It's a friend. These were serious friends, James and Seth, and they might still be friends in, private life. Seth may still be there for him for all we know. And I hope he is, because James clearly needs some help, it seems, going through all this stuff, all these accusations, etc. Anyway, so here's a little bit more backstory. Ye called attention to a 2014 episode in which host Rogen joked about posing as a girl on Instagram and telling an unfazed Franco that he was way too young. In other Instagram posts, Ye said the bit featuring Rogen and Franco normalized this idea, which is a dehumanization issue. Very much regret making that joke, Rogen said to the Sunday Times. It was a terrible joke, honestly. While Rogen did not directly apologize or named Ye in the interview, they did come after a settlement was just reached in a lawsuit filed by two of the claimants against Franco, these accusations, who say they that James, how do I say this carefully with the YouTube censors, he created an acting school and ended up putting some of these students allegedly into situations that made them uncomfortable. Extreme situations, teaching master class about sort of adult scenes. And they had to do certain things on camera, acting in settings that would be considered unacceptable in traditional Hollywood film sets. Franco's attorneys, however, have dismissed the lawsuit as false, inflammatory, legally baseless, and brought on as a class action with obvious goal of grabbing as much publicity as possible for attention-hungry plaintiffs. However, he did settle. If he was telling the truth, you'd think it would be harder. I understand why plaintiffs do have to sort of meet in the middle. It's a lot of work to go through a lawsuit. It's a lot of stress for these people, etc. But the fact that they settled means that the defendant wasn't able to defend themselves. So they are now did something. We don't know what the details of that settlement are, but they settled. So 4 other women came forward. Rogen told Vulture he was the last person who should be talking about this type of topic, as I just said. So Charlene Yee has gone more specific. I've got to be careful with some of these keywords I say. Again, Charlene Yee has gone in much more specific detail about the problem. Now, I went to go check to see if she said anything recently since this. And she says, she pulls this quote of, I do not plan to work with him anymore. But then she said, the truth is, and then shows an IMDb page where James Franco is listed as an executive producer of the new series Pam and Tommy. And so she's sort of pointing out the hypocrisy of like, well, what are you doing there? Well, I looked at this, and it looks like they've either just been edited, and he was just removed, and someone called IMDb and said remove his name. I see his brother Dave Franco there, but I've looked at IMDb and I've checked, and I don't see anything listed. And to Seth's credit, these credits on there aren't always accurate. A lot of people just assume things, or maybe James was involved in an early version and hasn't been involved since, and so therefore he's not actually involved in this project. And so I think Charlene has to do a little bit more homework to make sure she's not actually continuing to spread false things, because now whether any of this other stuff was true, again, make your own decision, go through the evidence yourself, or the accusations rather. But this is false now, it looks like, unless they just are trying to save the butt. But I don't think so, because this came in 3 days ago before this interview was even asked. And this variety piece that shows the first images of Lily James as Pamela Anderson and Sebastian Stan as Tommy, they mention the producers, and nowhere is James listed. Dave Franco is executive producing with Megan Ellis, Sue Nagel, and Ali Krug. Chip Dillon and also executive producer Craig Gillespie will direct. And then typical Evan Goldberg, James Weaver, and Alex McAtee for Point Grey. That's who, and Robert Siegel. So they list all these producers and never listed James Franco. So maybe the IMDb was just wrong. That is actually a possibility. IMDb's are not always fully accurate. So there you go. A lot of people are sort of showing up the hypocrisy of, oh, yeah, but he's still working with them. It doesn't look like he is. And I don't think so. Look, I've met Seth. Seth's a really good guy. He's a really funny guy. He's a really nice guy. He's a really knowledgeable film lover. I'm sure this is tough for them. You got to put yourself in the middle of that. And I respect the fact that he waited as long as he could for James to sort of get his business in order. But I got to be honest, James's business does not look that great right now. And so James is going to have to address it. He was on Colbert and sort of denied things and whatever, but there are screenshots and things that show him potentially. The question is, were they underage? Were people sort of was it not fully consensual? Those are the things that need to be figured out, in which James really is in trouble. But look, it doesn't look good for James right now, and I can see why James has sort of stopped working for a while. And the fact that Charlene Yee is not keeping silent about it and sort of reiterating these issues, and Seth now putting this out instead of denying it, only all sort of adds to, like, again, what I said in the beginning, this is bad news for James Franco, because now his best friend, his collaborator, is now out there sort of condemning him without condemning him. That's the other thing I got to say. I don't feel like Seth is fully condemning him. He is, without sort of going as hard as he could have, you know what I mean? And I do respect that, because they're friends. So Seth's got to look out for number one, but he also can sort of put out the, you know, be fair, because I'm sure a lot of people work with him like, whoa, dude, what's going on? How have you not condemned James yet? What's going on? And he doesn't want to have to rush to do it, but he wants to sort of acknowledge the other people out there. As someone who doesn't, I follow the evidence. I'm always going to hear the evidence, and I want to hear from all sides. I want to hear from James in this, so I'm not condemning anybody in this video, but I got to say, from a look standpoint, James Franco doesn't look good right now. The fact that he had to settle instead of win when he was defending that case is not always, it's just clear. It means why would someone who's defending it and standing by what they did settle with somebody? I mean, I don't know. It's usually an odd thing. Sometimes it's just because sometimes the truth's in the middle. Sometimes there's, you know, like in my case, like I did some things that were a mistake, but not to the extent that I was labeled by my former employer. You know, take it as you will. You know, you got to be careful. Sometimes you gotta find that. So the fact that they had to find something in there must make Seth realize I got to say something, James. And I wonder if they've even talked to each other. You'd think they would have at this point. You'd think Seth would and James have gone back far enough that I hope he would have made the phone call and checked in with James first. Always call your buddies. Always call your friends. Always call people you've been there if they're going through it, even if they did something wrong. It's always better to talk to them. And it seems like these guys would. I think they're close enough that they would. So anyway, overall, the only other thing that's just frustrating is that Seth clearly created a comedy styling of not giving an F, and now he's got to sort of play it a little safer. But the dude's clearly watching out for himself. What is he supposed to do? I don't know. I see a lot of criticism up there. Oh, Seth pioneered this R-rated type of hot comedy where he doesn't give a crap and makes fun of people and genders and whatever things that, you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Him and Judd Apatow. And now they're sort of just trying to like condemn everybody for the same types of humor. Look, I just think they're looking out for themselves. It's the culture we live in now. What are they supposed to do? And I applaud Rogan for smartly stepping outside of Hollywood. He's creating now a marijuana business that honestly will probably be his legacy. Let's be clear. The movies will always be part of it, but what he's doing with his houseplant business is going to only grow huge. It's going to be ginormous for him. So I imagine the movies will become a hobby at a certain point, and that marijuana business will become his real bread and butter. So look, I like Seth. I do like him. I know some people don't like his political stuff on Twitter and stuff, but I do. I think he's a funny guy, and I've met the guy. He's a really good guy, and I'll never forget him coming on MovieFights for us. It was definitely the best episode he can. So look, I do feel for him and James. I hope James gets some help. I hope James takes accountability because he's not doing anything now. Good, take that break and figure out what's going on and come back stronger. Everybody deserves a second chance as long as you take that accountability and, you know, pay for the things that you did do, however you need to get that done. I hope that's where we're at. If you guys like this type of commentary news stuff, please hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for all alerts. You got to double check your notifications. Make sure you are resubscribed. YouTube is not sharing certain videos of mine, so I appreciate all you guys who let me know and still stay tuned and check the channel. You guys are amazing. I appreciate you. Stay tuned for more here on Popcorn Planet.